Been here for about 30 years now, and I don't think I've ever seen the water come this high and this far.
In the streets, you can't even ride down here. Everything's blocked off. It's amazing, man. I ain't never seen nothing like this. It's crazy.
Tonight, millions across the East Coast are dealing with the aftermath of a massive storm that brought heavy rain and wind, knocking out power and leaving homes and businesses flooded. And this is not the end of the rough weather. I'm Ellison Barber in for Gadi Schwartz, coming to you tonight from London. And this is Stay Tuned Now. Hundreds of thousands of people remain without power tonight along the Northeast from that powerful storm. At least 5 people have been killed. The biggest risk right now is flooding. Entire neighborhoods underwater, cars completely submerged, and in some cases, people had to be rescued because the water was too high. Streams and rivers are still overflowing, and it is only making matters worse. In Connecticut, the heavy rain caused a partial dam break, leading to evacuations.
Once the water was up to the brick facade out there, which is probably about 3 feet of water, we could see the current that was going, and we weren't going to be able to walk across the current. And so we, at that point, just kind of committed to staying in the building.
And high winds played a major role in the damage left behind. Just take a look at what's left of this fishing center in Harkers Island, North Carolina, where the National Weather Service clocked a wind gust of 102 miles per hour last night. And this is not the end of the wicked weather. Another winter storm is expected on Friday. With it, we expect to see a cold Arctic blast for the Great Plains and Midwest, and even more wind and rain for the East Coast. We have a team tracking the latest conditions tonight. Meteorologist Bill Cairns is standing by in our New York studios, but we begin with NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa in Paterson, New Jersey. Emily, that flooding behind you looks intense. What are people impacted by this storm telling you there in New Jersey?
Well, when you consider, Ellison, the pace at which some of these floodwaters have been rising throughout the day, it's been a frightening situation for a lot of the residents in the area. Parts of the Northeast has saw nearly 5 inches of rain on already saturated ground. So what happens when that water has nowhere to go, but it goes into communities? It led to water rescues across the region in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in Connecticut. In Connecticut, along the Yantic River, there have been evacuation orders after a partial dam breach from a swollen river there. This is all part of a massive, sprawling winter storm that brought blinding snow to the Midwest. It brought tornadoes to the south and whipping winds up and down along the coast. At least 5 people tragically died throughout the region from this massive winter storm. And you think about it, Ellison, I was actually in this region a few weeks ago covering a very similar situation, water rescues from floodwaters. People in this area fed up and frustrated and concerned about these serious storms. Take a listen here.
I've been here 12 years. I can't take this anymore. This is going to be my last year, hopefully, here, because I can't deal with this flood. I can't, God forbid it's an emergency. I got to call them to come pick me up, the fire department. And they come in their boats and they take me out of here.
And I've been speaking with water rescue teams. They are not letting their guards down, with several New Jersey rivers expected to remain at flood stage for the next several days. So we could continue to see floodwaters spill into communities just as more rain is set to head this way, Ellison.
Yeah, Emily, another storm is moving into the west as we're learning more about an avalanche in California that happened earlier today. What can you tell us about that?
So we're learning from officials that the avalanche happened shortly after a major ski resort near Lake Tahoe area had happened. Tragically, it killed 1 person, according to officials, and injured another person. We're told that was a non-life-threatening injury. They were both guests from out of town. You think about it, at a time when so many people are headed in that direction to the slopes this time of year. 2 other people, according to officials, had also been swept up in the slide in the avalanche, but fortunately other people had pulled them from the snow. Still a developing situation. They are going to be conducting an investigation into the avalanche at a busy time for the ski season, Ellison.
Emily Aketa, thank you. Let's turn now to meteorologist Bill Cairns, keeping track of the latest conditions. Bill, there's another winter storm later this week.
Well, good evening to you, Ellison. And as advertised, another huge winter storm is about to move through the middle of the country. This one's going to have it all, just like the last one. Blizzard conditions in some areas, like Chicago, all the way back through the Midwest. It could have, conditions could be so bad it could be difficult to travel for a day or two. Severe weather possible in the south and high winds throughout areas of the west. So here's our storm over Idaho. It's already been spreading a lot of snow over the Intermountain West. Along with it, some very high winds. And those high winds will even kick through Southern California as we go throughout the day tomorrow, and we could have minor damage in some of the higher elevations. So we have 36 million people under winter storm warnings, watches, even a blizzard warning in areas of Nevada. We still have the winter storm warnings around Lake Tahoe, where of course that avalanche happened at Palisades Tahoe earlier today, Pocatello. And then as we head towards the middle of the country, this is where we're going to see the worst of it on Friday. Winter storm watch is already up for almost all of Iowa, including areas like Chicago back into Michigan. So as far as the snow forecast goes, we're still going to add a couple feet in some of the high elevations. This is like one of those snow situations where it's getting colder, we get powder out there. So a lot of the ski resorts that have been waiting for storms like this, you're going to get it. Of course, with the heavier snows does come that avalanche threat, so we'll have to watch that. But, the Wasatch Range, heading up through areas of Idaho, the Cascades, the Sierra, the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, I mean, this is the storm for you. So as we play this all out, here's where the storm will be tomorrow, heading out of Colorado into the middle of the country. Snow breaks out in areas of Nebraska and Kansas. Then severe weather, unfortunately, late tomorrow night into Friday morning. Isolated strong storms to areas like Shreveport, Alexandria, East Texas, and possibly even southern Arkansas. Then the storms sweep through the south. They'll be making their way through the southeast as we go throughout Friday, and at the same time could have blizzard conditions in the Midwest. If we're going to get those strong tornadoes, the possibility would be in areas of Alabama, Georgia, especially central Georgia, and into South Carolina. Hopefully this will be a little further north than where all those powerful storms hit just 2 days ago. And the blizzard portion of the storm will still linger in areas of the Great Lakes all the way through Saturday. For the Northeast, this is just a rain event. Shouldn't be as heavy as the last one, but we still got rivers that are in flood stage now, so I'm sure a lot of them will spike back up and then hopefully quickly go back down. And then, on top of all of this, just added insult, for anyone that loses power with this storm, it's not like the last one, where it's kind of mild. It is going to be bitterly cold behind this storm. So this storm accelerates up here and heads up near the Hudson Bay, drags down cold Arctic air. I mean, the door is open for the first time from Canada, and temperatures are just going to plunge. Some areas will be 20 to 40 degrees colder than they should be this time of year, and it's typically extremely cold this time of year anyways. So here's the high temperatures. Billings on Sunday, high temperature, -3. That's as warm as it's going to get even with the sun out during the day. Denver, 8-14. Here in Des Moines, everyone's watching the caucus forecast. 0 on Monday, caucus day and Tuesday, 7 degrees, wind chills in the negative numbers. So you get the idea of just how cold it's going to be behind this latest winter storm, Ellison. Buckle up.
All right, Bill Cairns, thank you. The countdown is on. In less than a week, Republicans in Iowa will head to the polls for the state's presidential caucuses. And tonight, the field of contenders narrowed by 1. Just hours ago, former New Jersey Governor Christie announced he's dropping out of the race, but he says his battle against Donald Trump is not over yet.
I've always said that if there came a point in time in this race where I couldn't see a path to accomplishing that goal, that I would get out. And it's clear to me tonight that there isn't a path for me to win the nomination, which is why I'm suspending my campaign tonight for President of the United States. I am going to make sure that in no way do I enable Donald Trump to ever be President of the United States again.
About an hour from now, 2 of the remaining Republican candidates will make a final bid to voters ahead of the big day on Monday, January 15th. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis are facing off in the first Republican presidential debate of the new year as they attempt to undercut frontrunner Donald Trump. The former president, he plans to skip the debate. Instead, he'll headline a Fox News town hall. Our team of reporters is standing by to bring you the latest. Let's start with NBC's Shaq Brewster in New Hampshire, where Christie just made that announcement. Shaq, thank you so much for being with us. Talk to us about this announcement and the mood there. I mean, he wasn't polling very high. In some ways, this probably wasn't a surprise to supporters, but What do we know about why he decided to drop out now? And what do you make of the timing of this as someone who follows politics and this sort of thing so closely?
Hi there, Ellison. Well, you know, I would describe the mood as sad, but still you had some determination there. He was still looking ahead to whatever that next thing could be. Look, we saw Governor Christie exit this campaign in a similar fashion in which he entered this campaign. He kept his attention on Donald Trump, saying that what made him different from the other candidates in this race was that he was the one willing to take on Donald Trump, to go after him on things like morality, on ethics, on the legal troubles that the former president is now facing. So he left the campaign still hitting those marks, but acknowledging what we see in polling, that he just doesn't have a clear path to the nomination. And I just got off the phone with a senior campaign aide who acknowledged that that is what went into this, that it was a lot of it was assessing the polling and looking at what can happen over the next 2 weeks to fundamentally shift it. And they just didn't want to risk the opportunity or possibility that him staying in this race could benefit Donald Trump.
So, Shaq, is his absence on the ballot going to be a problem for more centrist Republicans? Who might they look to cast their ballots for, their caucus vote for now?
Yeah, you know, I mentioned the mood in that room being sad, and that was based on a lot of the supporters that I talked to who now feel like they're lost. They don't know exactly what to do because of how unique of a candidate Christie was in this Republican race. I want you to listen to some of those conversations I had with folks right after he announced he's suspending his campaign.
We're very sad that he's suspended his campaign.
What do you plan to do now? Who gets your support?
That's a great question.
Not the former president, but I haven't decided who, because I haven't listened to anybody else.
You were a big supporter of Governor Christie.
Very big.
What do you do now?
I have no idea. I haven't had time to really think about it. And right now, I don't see anywhere to go.
You know, Ellison, there's conventional wisdom that suggests that most of Christie's support will go to Nikki Haley, but you listen to those conversations and you see it's not clearly and it's not an obvious assumption to make at this point.
You mentioned Nikki Haley. I have to ask you about sort of the rumors, the discussions around a hot mic incident with Christie, talking about what seemed to be his former opponents at one point, I think using the word she. Let's listen to some of that and then we'll keep talking.
She spent $68 million so far, just on TV. Spent $68 million so far, $59 million by DeSantis, and we spent 12. I mean, who's punching above their weight and who's getting a return on their investment, you know? And she's going to get smoked, and you and I both know it. She's not up to this.
So, Shaq, what do you make of that? Has there been any fallout? Has Christie said anything?
He has not said anything about those remarks. And I'll tell you also in that hot mic moment, you heard him talk about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, saying that he was petrified, that they had a conversation and DeSantis sounded petrified with the idea of him leaving this race. I think the comments don't really surprise you. One thing, and that was something that stuck out with me about them. Even yesterday, we heard Governor Christie at a campaign event say essentially, if there was anyone else in this field who was willing to go after Donald Trump in the manner in which he was going after Donald Trump, he would consider dropping out and supporting that person. And he just doesn't have confidence in the other candidates, in Nikki Haley, in Ron DeSantis, to take it to Donald Trump, which has been, since he launched his campaign, his #1 goal, making sure Donald Trump isn't the Republican nominee, Ellison.
All right, Shaq Brewster, thank you. We appreciate it. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale is joining us now from tonight's debate venue. That's at Drake University. Ali, you also are no stranger to campaigns and the campaign trail. Only 2 Republican presidential candidates qualified for tonight's debate. It's on CNN. What can we expect to hear from both Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis as they vie for a second place, really, right now behind Trump? And I have to ask you, as someone who has covered this so much, how odd is it to just see 2 candidates on a debate stage?
It's really weird, Ellison, especially when neither of those two candidates are the actual front runner. And so what Christie said while dropping out remains to be true for what we're going to see tonight, which is that people like DeSantis and Haley are effectively pretending that the race only exists between them, when in reality, the front runner is nowhere on that stage and has such a massive lead over the pack that he's faced no negative blowback for completely blowing off debates, which had previously been such a traditional and frankly essential part of the primary process. And so it's a shame for voters that they don't get to see him up there. But at the same time, politically, it looked like quite a savvy move, because he does not have to defend the finer points of his record, and it gives his opponents no opportunity to go head to head with the man who's at the top of the pack. And so, yes, we're going to see a debate tonight that's probably more substantive, that's probably more full of fiery moments. There's just less candidates on the stage. DeSantis and Haley are eager to mix it up with each other. But in terms of the reality, when you zoom out off the debate stage tonight, they're not the only two in this race. And that's, I think, what makes this the weirdest part of all these races that we've covered.
Yeah, so when we're talking about kind of the elephant in the room who is not going to be on stage, former President Donald Trump, he is going to be doing this bit of counter-programming with his Fox News town hall. Yeah. But he also is making some comments that we heard him make about then-candidate Obama back in the day, where he's promoting this false birther conspiracy idea. But this time it is about Nikki Haley. He shared an article on his social media platform, Truth Social, that falsely claimed she was ineligible to run for president because her parents were not U.S. citizens when she was born. What's been the reaction to that, particularly in a place like Iowa? I mean, is this a strategy that works for the former president? And does it tell us anything about who he thinks is the bigger threat to him right now?
Well, it definitely tells us that he views Nikki Haley as a threat. You see that not just in the way that he's now reviving birtherism attacks that are completely unfounded and untrue, but also in the way that he and his campaign are starting to leverage their attack ads, especially in places like New Hampshire. Haley, of course, benefiting potentially from Christie leaving the race at this point, because it frees up his voters to potentially look at her. And our polling, as Shaq referenced, does show that, in theory at least, when people are asked by pollsters, they would choose Haley. A majority of Christie supporters would choose Haley as sort of their second choice. I mean, we'll see what they actually do when they get into the polling booth. I think some of that will be affected by what happens in Iowa. But the idea with Trump reviving birtherism claims, to me, we'll say the same thing now that we said when he did it to Barack Obama, when he did it to Vice President Kamala Harris, and now when he's doing it to his rival, Nikki Haley. None of these claims are true, and all of those people seem to have one thing in common, which is that they are non-white opponents of Donald Trump.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and campaign trail guru, Ali Vitale, thank you for your reporting and that important context. We really appreciate you. We'll talk soon, my friend. Thank you. Tonight, the CEO of Boeing is promising to fully cooperate with the NTSB and FAA investigations into that mid-flight disaster on a Boeing MAX 9 last Friday. The aviation giant, with its reputation at stake, is promising to do better as the MAX 9 remains grounded and investigators search for answers. Here's NBC's Tom Costello.
5 days after a near-catastrophic mid-air emergency, the CEO of Boeing, in an exclusive interview with CNBC's Phil LeBeau, says he was devastated and emotional seeing the gaping hole in that Alaska Airlines MAX 9 Friday night.
What I really saw was the empty seat. And I had spent a week with my kids and grandkids, and so enough said.
Thankfully, no one was seated near the hole. During a Boeing safety stand-down Tuesday, CEO David Calhoun told employees airline and passenger confidence in Boeing is at stake.
We're going to approach this, number one, acknowledging our mistake.
The NTSB's focus, that blown-out door plug, looking for signs of metal fatigue and whether it was ever properly secured. 4 critical bolts have not yet been recovered. Both Alaska and United Airlines, which fly the MAX 9, report finding loose bolts around other MAX 9 door plugs.
How did an unsafe airplane fly in the first place?
Because a quality escape occurred.
Calhoun doesn't know if the breakdown in production line quality control happened at Spirit Aerosystems, which makes the fuselage, or Boeing, which turns out the plane. Spirit said today it remains focused on the quality of each aircraft structure that leaves our facilities. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
Are you concerned about the quality of product that Boeing is turning out, and should the American public be concerned? What I'll say is that every plane that they deliver to an airline, every plane that goes into the skies needs to be 100% safe, and they need to be able to demonstrate that.
5 years after 2 MAX 8 crashes killed 346 people overseas, CEO Calhoun says the company's reputation is on the line.
It's serious. It's a safety incident, and nobody's going to live with that, period.
United and Alaska Airlines are still waiting for inspection guidance. The procedures from Boeing and the FAA likely to take several hours per plane. For now, all MAX 9 flights nationwide remain grounded. Alaska says at least through Saturday. Back to you.
NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello, thank you. Don't go anywhere because we are just getting started. Up next, Endgame, the push to ban tackle football across California. Details on the intense debate with evolving health risks at the center of it all. Plus, the growing calls for answers from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. The changes now being talked about in the discussion about the importance of chain of command. And we'll try to answer a critical question in the Middle East. What could it take for Israel to stop fighting its war in Gaza? Stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Donald Trump's second-rate defamation trial against E. Jean Carroll is only 1 week away, and now the judge is saying the former president cannot argue that he did not sexually assault her, repeat that she's a liar, or deny that he's called her one. In May last year, Trump was found liable for sexually abusing Carroll. The upcoming trial deals with the denials Trump made while in office. Today, Senator Bob Menendez filed a motion to dismiss an indictment charging him with bribery and acting as a foreign agent. Menendez's lawyer says the charges are unconstitutional and therefore that there should not be a trial. The New Jersey Democrat, his wife, and 3 New Jersey businessmen have all been charged with bribery. All have pleaded not guilty. A trial is set for May 6th. A new report from the Anti-Defamation League documents an astronomical rise in the number of anti-Semitic incidents in the United States. According to the ADL, anti-Semitic incidents rose 360% in the 3 months following the October 7th terror attack in Israel. The ADL says there were an average of 34 incidents a day, putting 2023 on track to be the worst year for anti-Semitic acts against Jewish people since the ADL began keeping track. Legendary college football coach Nick Saban is retiring. Saban just completed his 17th season at the University of Alabama. He's won 6 national titles during his time there. Saban saying, quote, "It is not just about how many games we won and lost, but it is about the legacy and how we went about it." Any peanut butter and bacon fans out there? Well, now you can have the best of both worlds, I guess. Sonic is launching a peanut butter and bacon double cheeseburger with a milkshake to match. It is available for those of you with a brave stomach until February 4th. Tonight, both the House Oversight Committee and Judiciary Committee formally voted to hold the president's son, Hunter Biden, in contempt of Congress for defying a subpoena. These votes came after a day of just pure chaos on Capitol Hill. Hunter Biden showed up unannounced on the Hill this morning. House Republicans have been trying to question him privately as part of their impeachment inquiry into his father. Hunter has agreed to testify, but only if his testimony is public. Cue the fireworks.
We will not provide Hunter Biden with special treatment because of his last name. All Americans must be treated equally under the law, and that includes the Bidens.
Who brought Hunter Biden to be here today? That's my first question. Second question, you are the epitome of white privilege, coming into the Oversight Committee, spitting in our face, ignoring a congressional subpoena to be deposed. What are you afraid of? You have no balls to come up here and...
Mr. Chairman, point of inquiry.
Mr. Chairman,
if the gentlelady wants to hear from Hunter Biden, we can hear from him right now, Mr. Chairman. Let's take a vote and hear from Hunter Biden. What are you afraid of?
Hold on. Order.
So there's no one, well, other than 1 or 2, that want to hear from the witness. So the majority of my colleagues over there, including the chairman, don't want to hear from the witness with the American people watching.
I think it's clear and obvious for everyone watching this hearing today that Hunter Biden is terrified of strong conservative Republican women because he can't even face my words as I was about to speak to him. What a coward.
For more, let's go to NBC's senior national political reporter, Sahil Kapoor.
Well, we saw some heated clashes at a House committee hearing today when Hunter Biden, the son of President Joe Biden, made a surprise appearance to sit in the audience as House Republicans moved forward with a contempt resolution to hold Hunter Biden in contempt for failing to comply with a congressional subpoena. Hunter Biden's appearance was designed in part to try to convey that he's not hiding from this House Republican investigation, that he is willing to testify before them as part of their impeachment inquiry into his father, but he's not willing to do it behind closed doors as Republicans have demanded. He insists that he will only testify in public for the cameras to see because he and his legal team argue that Republicans will distort his words, that will rip them out of context in bad faith to try to advance a political narrative. Take a listen to what Hunter Biden's attorney Abby Lowell told reporters today.
Hunter chose a hearing where Republicans could not distort, manipulate, or misuse that testimony. The Republican chairs today then are commandeering an unprecedented resolution to hold someone in contempt who has offered to publicly answer all their proper questions. The question there is, what are they afraid of?
And the Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz said he would be happy to hold Hunter Biden in contempt, to vote to do that after Republicans vote to hold in contempt members in their own ranks, like Scott Perry, Jim Jordan, and others who defied congressional subpoenas in the January 6th committee. That was a little taste of the back and forth we got. When it was all said and done, the House Judiciary Committee voted 23-14 along party lines to hold Hunter Biden in contempt. If the full House of Representatives approves that resolution, it would go to the Justice Department, specifically a U.S. attorney in Washington, who would have the decision to make about whether to criminally prosecute Hunter Biden for contempt of Congress. Ellison?
Tackle football for preteens could soon be banned in the state of California. Under Assembly Bill 734, children would not be allowed to hit the gridiron until they are 12 years old. The legislation passed a key committee vote earlier today. The bill's author argues that flag football is a safer option for young athletes. It comes as study after study shows the serious and increasing health risks of head-to-head contact sports, specifically for young people. According to the CDC, football has the highest rate of concussions of all youth sports. In one study, Young Brains from Boston University CTE Center, you can actually see the damage that researchers say comes from repeated hits to the head. Some of the parents of these athletes actually spoke to the New York Times.
His whole person started to change.
It was an abrupt change. He was a different person.
He wasn't the same kid.
He became unrecognizable.
Just a fragment of himself.
He wasn't Wyatt.
And we couldn't figure it out.
And unfortunately, we couldn't recognize possibly what was happening with him until it was too late.
NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo joins me now. So, Stephen, let's start with the bill itself. What exactly would it do? How likely is it to become law? And what has the reaction been?
Yeah, well, it did pass a committee hurdle today, Ellison, but it still has to pass the full assembly in order to become a law this year. So it still has a ways to go. It would ban kids under 12 from playing tackle football, but it would actually be phased in. It wouldn't start off with that 12-year-old ban. It would start with kids under 6 in 2027, then move kids 10 and under, would ban them from playing tackle in 2029 until it eventually gets to 12 and under. We are hearing from both sides. As you can imagine, this is a bit of a controversial issue. Other states have tried this, but if passed, California would be the first state in the country to actually do this. Here's what both sides are saying.
There's certain things that just aren't safe for younger people, and banging your brains around for little kids just isn't safe. And really, there's no safe way you can do youth tackle football for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds.
This is the third time that it's come up. We've had to fight it all 3 times, and I can just tell you that we'll fight it again. Those kids in our most needed communities, inner city communities, our rural schools, are going to miss out on a lot of life lessons as well.
Now, you hear some of the reasoning there, Ellison. You mentioned those studies earlier, and that's what advocates of this bill are saying is the cause. You need to protect young people's brains. They say that it's a no-brainer, if you'll excuse the accidental pun there. The opponents, though, as we heard from that gentleman, saying that this would stop kids from exercising, learning teamwork, and that type of thing. So it's yet to be seen exactly how this will play out.
I mean, look, Stephen, I'm from Georgia. high school football. It is no joke back home. I know that there is a lot of controversy around this, but we've also seen the NFL take a very different approach to talking about concussions and brain injuries in recent years. I mean, we've seen practices go from just normal helmets to them wearing those sort of like halo type pads around their helmet. I'm curious, is there any indication of the state of football, youth football in particular today? Has it declined in popularity, or is it still kind of where it always has been?
Yeah, an excellent question, Ellison. I'm from Texas, and it's almost like a religion there. But even parents that I know I'm talking to, they're saying that they just can't, they don't feel comfortable sending their kids out on the field to play. As far as popularity, it's been more difficult to track because of the pandemic, but football has rebounded in the number of students playing it more than other sports have rebounded. But in California in particular, I wanted to point this out. We have a reporting from the AP that actually says there's been a drop, about 18% of kids high school age, from playing tackle football between 2015 and 2022. That in the state of California, where this bill is being discussed. So there is some cause for that drop in students playing. Now, if this bill actually does end up passing in California, it could encourage other states to try to follow suit. It'll be interesting for you and I to see if Georgia and Texas will be among those.
I mean, we're going to hear it from our families either way. Lots of opinions. Stephen Romo, thank you. Coming up, toxic lead released into Southern California communities. A look at the serious impacts and what the EPA is doing to try and clean up the mess. Our NBC News investigation. But first, you gotta see this. A dog in Arizona got busted after he escaped from his own kennel. His name is King, and you can see he made a real mess of the shelter, even setting off a few alarms in the process. He tried to free a bunch of other dogs as well, opening some doors. Police were eventually called, and King got busted mid-jailbreak. The officer put King back to bed and cleaned up the mess he left behind. We will be right back. Welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following. We have new video showing the aftermath of that avalanche we told you about at the top of the hour. You can see rescuers using probes to search for victims there. That snowpack was 10 feet deep. One person was killed and another was hurt. It happened on a trail that just opened for the first time this season. You can see how rough the conditions are. The area is under an active winter storm warning and could see as much as 2 feet of snow. Late today, officials said the investigation into finding survivors of that avalanche is still underway. In Los Angeles, prosecutors decided not to file felony charges against former LA Dodgers pitcher Julio Urias. He was arrested last September for suspicion of domestic violence. The MLB placed him on administrative leave shortly after his arrest. Felony charges are seemingly off the table, but Urias is not off the hook. The LA Attorney's Office says they are still considering misdemeanor charges. Starbucks is being sued by a consumer advocacy group for false advertising. The lawsuit filed today claims Starbucks gets coffee from farms that have been accused of human rights abuses while touting their commitment to ethical sourcing. The suit claims there are documented abuses in places like Kenya and Brazil, and that Starbucks has continued to purchase from those suppliers despite the serious allegations against them. Starbucks is vowing to defend themselves against these claims. While battery recycling has its benefits, it also has its pitfalls. The EPA is deciding whether to designate at least 3 former battery recycling plants as Superfund sites to help clean up toxic lead released into communities in East Los Angeles. NBC's senior investigative and legal correspondent Cynthia McFadden takes us to one of those communities as she speaks with people who say their lives are being negatively impacted.
Here on the east side of Los Angeles, at what was once a battery recycling plant, they've chiseled the company's name, Exide, off the wall. If only it was as easy to erase the harm it has done to the people who live here.
It's very evil, very, very evil.
For most of the 40 years Monsignor John Moretta has served the neighborhood next to the plant, he has battled to close it, as the facility knowingly released cancer-causing arsenic and lead, in some places 650 times what the state says is safe. Well, more than 100,000 people have been affected.
I couldn't sit up here and just pray and just think that somehow people are going to be saved.
He and other community leaders were finally successful in getting the plant shuttered in 2015 after Exide admitted to felony violations, including the illegal storage and disposal of hazardous waste in a settlement with the Department of Justice. But now, 9 years after the plant closed, life-threatening problems remain.
Honestly, you can feel that you're sucking in dirt, grime. You can feel it on your skin.
The state's $500 million cleanup has failed. And a new study exclusively obtained by NBC News shows that the contaminated area is more than twice the size originally thought.
When we found out that our property was contaminated, we were heartbroken.
Like most people here, Guadalupe Valdivinos lives surrounded by her extended family.
Nobody cares how hurt we are, how sick we are. My 2-year-old is in behavioral therapy. Is it a coincidence? Nobody will tell me.
Children are particularly vulnerable to being poisoned by lead, which over time can cause brain damage and developmental delays. Community members say despite repeated requests, the state has not provided any long-term health testing. Mark Lopez's family has lived here since the 1950s.
I'm very motivated.
He now leads a nonprofit instrumental in shuttering Exide, but says he's furious the company got away with a modest fine, later declaring bankruptcy and dissolving in the U.S.
When we talk about environmental racism, it's not just the fact that these facilities exist in our communities. It's also when disaster happens, how do the authorities respond? And they respond in ways that tell us that our lives don't matter.
In fact, Dr. Jill Johnston was the lead author of a recent study that concluded the state's cleanup is not working. 4 out of 5 homes that were cleaned by the state are still contaminated. The team also concluded that 98% of homes as far as 4.5 miles from the former plant tested at lead levels above state standards. State officials at the Department of Toxic Substances Control, DTSC, responsible for the cleanup, have declined repeated requests for an interview.
How good a job have they done in your estimation?
Failed completely. Year after year after year, DTSC has failed.
DTSC did tell us they have hired a new contractor to run the cleanup and a third-party monitor. But after decades of failed promises, the community is both angry and in despair. Cynthia McFadden, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Tonight, lawmakers are demanding answers from Secretary Lloyd Austin after he delayed disclosing a medical condition and hospitalization to Congress as well as the White House. Pentagon officials revealed yesterday that Austin was diagnosed with prostate cancer and underwent a procedure for it last month. After some complications, Austin was rushed back to Walter Reed to treat a urinary tract infection and the buildup of fluids in his abdomen. As all of this was happening, the White House was essentially in the dark. The Defense Department did not disclose any of it to President Biden. Austin's deputy secretary did not even know about his hospitalization and ICU stay for 2 days. Republicans, on the Senate Armed Committee, they are demanding answers. They sent a list of 15 questions to the defense secretary earlier today, asking things like which Defense Department officials were made aware of the hospitalization before the deputy, and what was the nature of the secretary's incapacitation. Joining us now is NBC News military analyst, Medal of Honor recipient, and retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs. Colonel Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us as always. Let's jump right in because lawmakers on Capitol Hill, they have a lot of questions about the notification process here. The public understandably does as well. Health issues are such a personal issue. They're private. We have HIPAA laws for a reason, right? But this is not a normal person we're talking about. Does the Secretary of Defense have a moral and or legal obligation to tell the White House about a hospitalization? What about a diagnosis like the one that he has? And when, if at all, does the public have a right to know something like this?
Well, everybody in the chain of command has an obligation to know what everybody in the chain of command is doing. General Austin learned this when he was a cadet years ago at West Point. That the boss always has to know where his immediate subordinates are located. It's easy to do when you're in a small organization, but it still obtains even in large organizations. Even if you're commanding 17,000 troops and you're a 2-star general, your chief of staff needs to make sure that there's a procedure so that you know exactly where all your immediate report subordinates are located. It obtains even when you're President of the United States, your Chief of Staff has to make sure that all your cabinet officers tell the White House where they're located at all times. It's vitally important for continuity of chain of command, but it's particularly important in a circumstance in which you're dealing with people at the top of the food chain who have enormous responsibilities in a difficult period now when there are national security problems that need to be solved. So everybody in the chain of command needs to make sure that the procedures exist and that they're followed, Allison.
So when the secretary was in the hospital, the U.S. did carry out an airstrike that killed the leader of an Iranian-backed militia in Baghdad. Experts have called that a rare and controversial move. The Defense Department says the decision to carry out that strike was made before Austin was hospitalized, but it was carried out while he was still at Walter Reed. Do you think that was the right call?
Well, typically what happens in circumstances like this, when there are targets that are selected for attack, they are approved well in advance by the National Command Authority that includes the President and his office and the Secretary of Defense, as well as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the other Chiefs of Staff. A target list is approved, and usually, under most circumstances, the service will be given the opportunity to make the decision when the attack will occur. And that's probably what happened in this case. Secretary Austin almost undoubtedly participated in the decision to attack that target, even though it was done later on when he was in the hospital. But it doesn't change the fact that the information that passed up and down the chain of command about where the secretary was flawed, and it shouldn't happen again, Ellison.
Very quickly, I only have a little bit of time, but Colonel Jacobs, what do you think happens next? Should the secretary lose his job?
It's unlikely that he will lose his job, but there are people who work for the secretary who were responsible for ensuring that the White House knew where the secretary was. And most people would guess that some of them are at risk for losing their jobs. But there's no doubt about the fact that the secretary is responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen in his organization, and there certainly will be changes when he comes back to his office, Ellison.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and insights as always. Secretary of State Antony Blinken sitting down for key meetings today with Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. It is the latest stop in his high-stakes return to the region. The United States now encouraging Israel to scale back its war in Gaza and embrace some sort of plan for the Strip once this war ends. This is all happening as the death toll in Gaza surpasses 23,000. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons takes a look at what it might take for Israel to stop fighting.
Tens of thousands have been killed, say the United Nations and Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry. Among them, thousands of women and children. And thousands of Hamas fighters are dead too, say the Israelis. Yet one man is still alive, according to Hamas, its leader, Yahya Sinwar. While if Israel had located him, it would likely say so. Israel's failure to find Sinwar and many others in the Hamas high command is one reason its pledge to dismantle Hamas is far from fulfilled, meaning peace may be a long way off. We travelled to Beirut, Lebanon, to where last week the Hamas second-in-command died in a drone strike. Israel has not admitted it was behind the hit, but finding Salah al-Aruri, who had links to Iran, would have required a sophisticated spying operation. This local store owner, who says an air conditioner from the apartment smashed through his window, was amazed Hamas was there.
You never saw anyone living there?
Not one time, he says.
There, the hole in the roof where the munitions broke through before exploding, sending shrapnel hurtling across the street. This tree set on fire. This car incinerated. A textbook targeted assassination that risked killing many civilians.
Israel has a long, controversial history of targeting its enemies back to the 1950s. Its attempt to kill Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat in Lebanon and beyond were called Operation Saltfish. And after 11 Israeli athletes were killed at the Munich Olympics, it methodically tracked down the terrorists involved with deadly results. But Israel has also often slipped up. In 2010, the assassination of a Hamas leader in Dubai caused international uproar when the killers, in disguise, were caught on hotel cameras. Now the heads of Israel's intelligence and security agencies, Mossad and Shin Bet, are vowing to hunt down all those behind the massacre of October 7th, where 1,200 people died and some 240 were taken hostage. A person familiar with the Israeli government's thinking tells NBC News Qatar and Turkey have unofficial immunity from strikes against Hamas leaders there. Foreign diplomats and former US officials agree. With Hamas still holding hostages, Israel would be reluctant to undermine a communication channel through Qatar. We travelled to the capital of Qatar, Doha, to talk to a member of Hamas's political wing. Bassem Naim says many of his family in Gaza have been killed, seemingly in targeted strikes.
Any leadership, he is expecting at some time to be targeted.
Including you?
Including me.
He claims that efforts to keep the Hamas leader and mastermind of October 7th alive is just like the US protecting its presidents.
I am sure the security instructions for someone like Joe Biden is not the security instructions for you in any case.
Is Yahya Sinwar still in Gaza?
This is the last information I have.
Israel's hunt for the Hamas high command is pivotal. The country has accused Hamas of using civilians as human shields, as has the United Nations. And those who study Hamas say it may hold on to some hostages simply to protect its leaders. Hamas itself says it will not hand over all the hostages without a ceasefire. Israel, caught between a deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza with an escalating civilian death toll and the fear among some that to stop fighting while the Hamas leadership is still in place will look like a defeat.
Keir Simmons, thank you. Coming up, state of emergency, the growing concern in Ecuador after a prison break by one of the country's most notorious drug lords. A closer look at all of the violence in the region. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny appeared in court today via video from the Arctic penal colony he's currently serving time in. Navalny appeared to smile and even joke on camera about the weather there. He also asked if officials threw a party at his former prison when he left. The Putin critic is currently serving a 19-year sentence. The travel chaos in Germany, it is getting worse. There's a 3-day rail strike going on right now over higher pay and better hours. It's all happening as farmers protest subsidy cuts and use tractors to block roads throughout the country. The disruptions are making it difficult for people commuting to work. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Lithuania today in an effort to get more help for his country in its war against Russia. Zelensky said air defense systems are what Ukraine needs most right now. In recent weeks, Russia has ramped up its missile and drone attacks on major cities like the capital, Kyiv. Now to Ecuador, where schools and stores remain closed as government forces clash with drug cartels across the country. It comes after masked gunmen interrupted a live TV broadcast yesterday, holding journalists hostage. Police eventually stormed the station, arresting the gunmen and freeing those hostages. That all happened just days after a notorious gang leader escaped from a maximum security prison. NBC News correspondent Gadi Venegas is following it all for us. So, Gadi, the president of Ecuador says his country is effectively in a state of war. Explain to us what he means by that and who exactly in this situation is the enemy. Is it one gang or is it multiple?
Ellison, this is violence that has been escalating in Ecuador for years now. Last year, we saw a presidential candidate be assassinated. And in fact, that gang leader or organized crime leader that wasn't found in his cell on Sunday was also related to that assassination. That presidential candidate had said on television that he had received threats from this gang leader. And now he's missing in his cell. And we have to also keep in mind that a lot of the prisons in Ecuador are right now taken by the prisoners, and the military and the police are working to take control of a lot of these prisons. So after that happened, the president declared the state of emergency, and the gangs or cartels or, drug organizations, whatever you'd like to call them, they responded with an escalation of violence that included kidnapping police officers, going into schools, and then, of course, going into this television station. So the president has now designated 20 different gangs as terrorist organizations. So this war then would be between the military and police agencies against, so the police agencies and the military against what has now been declared the new terrorist organizations inside of Ecuador. In fact, the men that were arrested after going into that television station have now been charged with terrorism. And by declaring a state of emergency, Allison, both the military and the police will have a lot more power. Also, citizens in Ecuador will have less rights as they fight these criminal organizations.
So, Ecuador is a country sandwiched between Peru and Colombia. If I'm not mistaken, in Peru, they've declared a state of emergency along the border they share with Ecuador. I'm curious, when you look at this region, are regional politics a factor in the situation that we see happening in Ecuador?
Ellison, both countries are connected to what's happening in Ecuador. So the city most affected in Ecuador is Guayaquil. It's a city on the coast that is perfect for the drug trades for these criminal organizations. Now, according to the United Nations, both Colombia and Peru are two of the top cocaine producers in the world. So the way these cartels work, a lot of the drugs go from these countries to Ecuador, and eventually these drugs will make their way into the United States. Now, this is relevant because the drugs will bring in a lot of money. So these are criminal organizations that have a lot of money. Then that money is laundered through different organizations in Ecuador. This is one of the reasons why they have so much power. And now what we've heard from the governments in Colombia, Colombia's president is saying he fully supports the president of Ecuador. And meanwhile, Peru has also taken an interesting move, discussing now internally if they will apply new rules at the border, perhaps even shutting down their border with Ecuador to avoid some of the criminals from Ecuador to flee into Peru, Ellison.
Such a complicated situation. Guad Venegas, thank you. We appreciate your reporting. That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We will see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.